Welcome to 5POA Evolution, where I chronicle the history of one character in action figure form. This series is a love letter to the irreplaceable Glenn Webb, who we tragically lost in 2016. He was my introduction to the world of action figure videos, and his reviews, especially his action figure evolution videos, inspired me to want to make videos too. He was more than a reviewer, he was a personality. If you're a newer collector or maybe never heard of him, definitely check him out. February is the month of love, and in the spirit of Valentine's Day, I've decided to spotlight a female character I adore. Last year we looked at Storm. This year we're taking a look at Rogue. Rogue has the mutant ability to steal people's powers by touching them, but if you grew up in the 90s and watched the animated series like I did, chances are she also stole your heart. Naturally, we're not going to cover every Rogue figure ever made, but we will cover just enough of the highlights so that you can witness action figure evolution. Our journey begins in 1994 with Series 7 of the Uncanny X-Men by Toybiz. This Rogue stands at 5 inches, and depending on how you want to count it, has either 6 or 7 points of articulation. Nothing at the head, but her shoulder swivels, her elbow hinges, she has T-style swivel hips, they kick forward like so, and she also has single-jointed hinge knees. The reason I say it depends on how you want to count is because of this shoulder. Obviously there's a cut there, but you can't swivel it. It's in service to an action feature that gives her an uppercut. Rogue was not only a beloved member of the X-Men animated series cast, she was also one of the central characters. Considering the show came out in 1992, it's amazing that it took so long for a figure to be made. It's really an indictment on toy companies for how they saw female characters back then. In fact, Toybiz wouldn't give us a newly sculpted Rogue body until 1997's Monster Armor. This one's even less articulated than the first one. All she has are swivel hinge shoulders and V-style swivel hips. Instead of articulation, she's been frozen in this very awkward pre-pose stance. Though for 1997, I seem to remember feeling like it was pretty dynamic. Instead of an action feature, this time around Rogue's been given mutant monster transforming accessories. Specifically, she transforms into what the package calls a leech bat. Well, that's flattering. Otherwise, she has some bony wings, a clip-on scaly torso. To Toybiz's credit, the paint job does blend fairly naturally into the torso. And then moving all the way down, she has these monster feet. The crazy part is that there's technically a joint in there, but because of the way it's cut, if you try to bend it, it just kind of pulls apart. This is the assortment that she came in, though I dare say she would have also been pretty at home in this assortment. That's because this Rogue is modeled off of her look from Age of Apocalypse. Oddly enough, it wasn't the only Age of Apocalypse Rogue Toybiz released that year. This one was included in a famous couple's 2-pack with Gambit. That's right, there was a time when Toybiz released 2-packs based on romance. As it happens, this Rogue is just Emma Frost in a poncho. I really like the pearlized paint that they used, but they also just painted over a lot of sculpted detail that just doesn't make sense for this figure. The random corset, for example. Granted, this line work for the leg strap does kind of work, and the baggy sleeves do make sense. Note the gap though where they took off the jacket. Additionally, while not 100% accurate, the shorter hair is closer to how she looked in the comic. Putting them side by side, and I can see why Toybiz chose this body mold, but I can also see why they hid her under a smock. The irony is I'm not entirely sure which one came first. I just know that they came out in 1997. Beyond that, I can't find a more specific release date, so it's always possible that this was the release order. If you happen to have more insight, sound off in the comments. 1998 saw the launch of the X-Men Secret Weapon Force line, and this Rogue is part of the Power Slammer series. This was the most articulated Rogue we'd gotten up to this point. Thanks to a ponytail, she could turn her head. Not only that, but the ponytail itself was articulated. She has swivel shoulders, hinged elbows, V-style swivel hips, single-jointed knee, and ankle hinge. This particular figure is based off her Shi'ar costume. Note the shoulder armor and stamped on triangle and ribbing down the sides. In the comic, the costume was pink and yellow, whereas this is more of a burgundy. Not quite sure how she sees through those bangs, and that's going to be a real problem when it's time for her to run the batting cage at the X-Mansion. Seriously, these are wiffle balls. They load up here, and while you'd think pulling this lever would do something, you actually have to slam. Hence, you know, power slammers. Secret Weapon Force power slammers. Okay, enough sass out of me, let's see how it does. Okay. Fortunately, 1998 also gave us an updated standard Rogue. This Rogue was packed with Zangief as part of an X-Men vs. Street Fighter 2-pack. To match the aesthetic of the game, they gave her a more anime-style face. Shame that they couldn't line up the green of her eyes with the black. Otherwise, this was a perfect comic-style Rogue figure. For the first time ever, a long-haired Rogue had neck swivel, and just like Power Slammer, she had swivel shoulders, hinged elbows, V-style hips, hinged knee, and ankle hinge. She also had a softer rubber overlay for the jacket. Had they only reissued this figure with a standard comic head, it would have been the definitive 90s Rogue action figure. Luckily, there was a pin-headed Gambit to keep her company. Sorry, sugar, I don't date short guys. In the year 2000, the X-Men action figures and superhero cinema changed forever because of the X-Men movie. The film opted for a more grounded tone, focusing on the ideological conflict between Professor Xavier and Magneto. In a very bizarre choice, the film opted to make Rogue a pastiche of Jubilee and Shadowcat. Instead of a confident, powerful Southern belle, Rogue was now a runaway teen named Marie. While Anna Paquin did deliver a great performance based on the material she was given, she definitely wasn't Rogue. The accompanying figure line from Toybiz was a mixed bag. It was one of their earlier attempts at a realistic likeness, and it shows. One of the biggest issues is articulation. Take, for example, the V-style hips. The cut is so low it really functions more like a thigh cut. And then you have the really awkward pre-poses. It's a shame because there is a fair amount of painted detail here. Luckily, if you don't like it, you can always cover her up in this gigantic soft goods hooded coat. Despite the fact that she didn't wear one in the movie, Toybiz also released a figure of her in an X-Men uniform. If the proportions seem a bit odd or the details seem familiar, no, you're not crazy. Toybiz put a movie-style head on the Power Slammer's body. Oddly enough, even though Rogue did wear a costume very briefly at the end of X-Men 2, Toybiz did not make a figure of her for that movie. A new Rogue figure wouldn't grace action figure shelves again until 2003 with the Marvel Legends box set. This is one of the most notorious figures Toybiz ever made for their Marvel Legends line. It was hideous by 2003 standards, and time has not been kind to it. Never mind the fact that she looks like a combination of Katherine Hellman and Madonna. Just look at this nightmarish leg articulation. You've got the V-style hip, which, fine, but then to make her split, you essentially snap her thigh in half, and then you've got a thigh cut here. Flip her around and she has segmented butt cheeks. If that wasn't bad enough, the soft goods that they use for the jacket is literally crumbling while I'm holding it. If I did have to say something positive though, the hair is nice, and I do like the metallic green. In 2006, Toybiz took another crack at Rogue with this figure in their X-Men Classics line. She's based on her look from the Extreme X-Men comic, and I believe is the only figure of this costume that's been made so far. She commands a pretty hefty price on the aftermarket, but I was lucky enough to get this one for $10. I'd thought that maybe the seller just didn't know her value, or that I was just making out like a bandit. Turns out if I had just read the description or looked a bit closer at the pictures, it's because she's missing her fingers. Regardless, I think this figure represents a marked improvement over the previous one. The face looks a lot more natural. Great job on the shading and cosmetics, by the way. Nice job on the translucent goggles. The haircut is short and fun and doesn't get in the way of articulation. Speaking of articulation, this one's a lot better. Simple swivel balls this time around, and because of the complexity of the design, they were able to hide those joints a lot more naturally. There's a lot of nice sculpted detail here, lots of ribbing, as well as stitches and wrinkles. Instead of being tampoed on, the X logo is actually sculpted. They also did a very interesting thing where they gave her an ab crunch and a diaphragm joint. Because of that, she can hunch over really far and arch back really far. It's not much, but she does also get a bit of swivel. I passed on this figure when it first came out because it wasn't my preferred design. Now that I have her in hand, I see why she's so highly sought after. This might just be the best Rogue Toybiz ever made. As it happens, it's also the last. After 16 years of defining Marvel toys and setting standards for articulation, Toybiz finally lost the license. With Hasbro now at the helm, we wouldn't get another Rogue until 2012's Marvel Universe 3-pack. These figures were 3 3/4 inches, and unfortunately, I do not have them to share with you. In 2015, Hasbro did release a single-carded 3 3/4 inch Rogue. This one was based on her 80s punk look. At this point, they had rebranded Marvel Universe as Marvel Legends, which was very confusing to 6-inch collectors. The card featured some surprisingly realistic artwork and a product shot on the back. Other figures in the wave included Morbius, Quasar, and Hydro Man. It's Morbin time! To the top of her mohawk, she just barely makes it to 4 inches, and has a surprising amount of detail for a figure this small. Even more impressive is her articulation. Her head's on a ball joint, she has swivel hinge shoulders that can raise up 90 degrees, swivel hinge elbows, ball jointed hips, double jointed knees, and ankles that can hinge and pivot. Really shows what it a step backwards their current 3 3/4 inch scale series is. It also raises the question why characters like Spider-Ham or more importantly Howard the Duck can't be more articulated. I hate to say it, but it feels like this figure got more love and attention than some 6-inch scale figures get today. In 2016, Hasbro finally gave us an all-new classic style 6-inch Rogue in their Marvel Legends series. This figure was part of the Juggernaut wave, and the differences between her and the Toybiz figure are night and day. Not only does this figure not look like she just had a facelift, but the articulation is much better hidden so the figure has a greater emphasis on sculpt. Gone is the deteriorating cloth goods jacket, the overly complicated leg articulation's been replaced with simple ball joints and thigh cuts, and while the Toybiz figure's waist cut and ab crunch does add a lot of range, the Hasbro's diaphragm joint is not too shabby. And while I did wonder if maybe the yellow was just a bit too dark, though honestly it's not that different from the Toybiz yellow, my only complaint, and I really mean my only complaint, were the tops of her boots. Rather than being sculpted on like previous iterations, these are two floating pieces that constantly flop around. That is one area I dare say Toybiz did better. One thing this figure did have going for it was an alternate ungloved hand so that Rogue could use her powers. I really gotta hand it to Hasbro. It was the first time a toy company did that, and it was much appreciated. Now that the gloves were officially off, Diamond retaliated 2 years later with their very own Marvel Select Rogue. A 1/10 scale figure, this Rogue stands at just under 7 inches, and unlike Marvel Legends, is a 100% new sculpt. From the top, the first thing you'll notice is a lot more personality in the face, great shading and depth in the hair. It's also curlier than Legends, which a lot of fans were hoping for. Unlike Legends, the boots are sculpted on, and speaking of things the fans were hoping for, the yellow is much brighter. And despite the fact that Marvel Select is contractually limited in the number of joints it can have, it's actually more articulated. Unlike the Legends, the Select figure has bicep swivel and double jointed elbows. This was unheard of for a Hasbro Lady Legend at the time. She also has boot cut. Legends didn't have that one either. Using either the thigh cut or boot cut, some collectors chopped her down to make her shorter and fit in with their Legends collection. Unlike Legends, which only came with 2 fists and an ungloved hand, Select has fists, open hands, an ungloved hand, and a hand holding the other hand's glove. And if all that wasn't enough, she even came with a section of Danger Room diorama. Not to be outdone, in 2020, Hasbro got its revenge by reissuing their Rogue on a retro card. The hair was bigger and curlier, the yellow was yellower, and this time she had a glove-holding hand of her very own. Otherwise, she's basically the same as the Juggernaut Wave version. The same unfortunate boots, and sadly, no metallic green this time around. That said, it is a bit closer to the Select version. Our next Hasbro Rogue also came in 2020. This one came in a 2-pack with Pyro. Sadly, most of the detail is painted on, but there are some new pieces. This includes pinless legs, which seem to be one step closer to the classic style legs I'm hoping for. As is often the case with characters in skirts, the range is a bit iffy. She can only kick forward about this far, but she does get a really good split. The skirt also does a really good job of hiding the thigh cut. The figure includes a warm, smiling face, and another one with a bit more attitude. Also, in addition to fists, this Rogue comes with open hands. If you appreciate a more modern Rogue and don't care about Pyro, you can get this one loose on eBay for less than $20. Honestly, it's worth it just for the heads. Frankly, they look great on your other Rogue figures. Sadly, there's only one Rogue left to talk about in this video, the 2021 Age of Apocalypse Colossus Wave. Surprisingly, there's a lot of new tooling here. The head's new, of course. The hairstyle's unmistakable. On the surface, the torso seems like one we've seen a million times, but that's not entirely the case. To accommodate the collar, an extra hole's been put in the back. As for the lower torso and upper legs, those come from Shriek. To make it a bit clearer, here's the Amazing Friends box set version of Firestar. At first I thought that the puffy sleeves were reused from either Storm or Kitty, but that's not the case. If they are reused though and you recognize them, sound off in the comments. Otherwise, the leg strap is new, and so are these lower legs, including these really fun platform boots. In addition to open hands, she does come with a pair of fists, and since the yellows match, you could use the alternate hands that came with the retro card. Conversely, you could also use the Age of Apocalypse open hands on this one. And if you wanted to, you could always switch the heads. Just note that this one does sit a little high. Here we have the complete action figure progression of Age of Apocalypse Rogue, and of course, the classic. Whatever quibbles I might have about the retro card, putting the first figure side by side the most current does show how far she's come. As for what's next for Rogue, there is an 80s style version on the way. Beyond that though, who knows? Rogue is a mutant after all, and mutation is the key to evolution. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.